SUV! In the SUV! Get down on the ground! Get down on the ground! Watch crossfire! Watch crossfire!
It's what officials in Virginia are calling a once-in-a-generation happening when a police officer is attacked, abducted, and taken hostage in his own squad car. All this leading up to a deadly officer-involved shooting.
Go for it, guys! Go for it, guys! Please just get back. Get off my gun! I often say that these body-worn camera videos speak for themselves. I believe this is one of those instances. You probably picked up that our officer was attacked, to say the least. The perpetrator attempted viciously and violently to disarm our uniformed Fairfax County police officer, and I think you saw that rather clearly. On top of that, he was literally abducted and taken hostage in his own marked police car.
It happened on May 11th in Fairfax County, Virginia. When a license plate reader tracked a stolen U-Haul, a Fairfax County Police Department officer responded to a gas station where the vehicle was parked. Body camera video shows the responding officer approach the suspect, later identified as 38-year-old Brandon LeMagne.
Trying the U-Haul? Yeah. Yeah, can you talk to me real quick over here? Alright, we're gonna go right over here, man. What did I do?
LeMagne can be heard asking the officer what he did, as the officer explains he's being detained.
Detained, okay? So your report is stolen. Why? Since when? You're not arrested, you're just being detained, okay? What's report is stolen? Right. 2 Bravo, hold the channel, sending a unit to Sicko up here by North Walmart.
Just seconds after the officer approaches LeMagne, a fight breaks out. The officer calls out via his radio, saying LeMagne is reaching for his gun.
What the? Sir, you're good. Get off my gun. Our holsters that, and I have one on right now, that carry our firearm have a double retention feature. I'm not going to describe that double retention feature because I don't want that to be public knowledge. But thankfully, we've had this double retention feature holster for several years because one of the 2 retention mechanisms was defeated. It was the second retention mechanism that ultimately contributed to this officer living to fight another day, because I firmly believe that the perpetrator, the assailant in this case, if he were to have lodged that gun free from the officer's holster, would have killed him, would have executed him. There's no doubt in my mind.
The struggle continues as the officer again asks LeMagne to get off his weapon.
What report is stolen? Sir, get off my gun. Take one! Just stop! Take one! Sir, you're not going to jail yet, right? Get off my gun. Off my gun.
Seconds later, LeMagne opens the officer's squad car and both partially enter the vehicle.
Get off my gun! Get off my gun!
As the struggle continues, the vehicle is put into gear and begins moving.
Go for it, guys! Go for it, guys! Please just get back. Get off my gun!
The vehicle is thrown in reverse and crashes into a nearby McDonald's, hitting 2 other vehicles along the way. Meanwhile, other officers respond to the chaotic scene.
Just crashed into the Walmart!
Richmond Highway, it's a gas station right next to a McDonald's, a fast food restaurant. There's cars, there's people. There certainly could have been, there weren't, and thankfully there weren't. There could have been pedestrians either coming or going into the McDonald's. They were inside, thankfully. Their cars were parked and unoccupied outside. So certainly that runs through our minds, and it runs through the minds of the officers in real time when they're dealing with a potentially real deadly threat. And that assault that went mobile, that kidnapping, that abduction that went mobile, happened in real time in a small amount of space. So our officers are trained, like police officers across the country, to consider their background, to consider the presence of others who could be in harm's way. But oftentimes, in spite of those best efforts, there is some inevitable potential that other people could be harmed. And I put that squarely on the perpetrator. He chose to do this. He responded to his actions. His actions, in my opinion, his intent, rather, was to kill that police officer. So, but certainly that's a consideration. And anytime we have a critical incident, there will be training conversations that result. There are certainly some parts of this critical incident that we will continue to examine and will be part of our training curriculum going forward, either to enhance or to alter. But that's all part of our review.
Officials say 2 of the responding officers opened fire after the squad car crashed.
In the car! In the car! What car? The SUV! In the SUV! Get down on the ground! Get down on the ground! Watch crossfire! Watch crossfire!
And you can also hear the engine revving, and you can hear the engine revving because our perpetrator is on that gas pedal. He's not done. So any notion that when that vehicle came to rest, in the McDonald's parking lot, it was over. It wasn't over. It was still very much a very active scene. So the investigation will examine the actions of the police officers. Ultimately, we'll share all of our findings in real time with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, but a lot of those questions will be subject to the investigation.
Responding officers then escort the wounded officer from the squad working to treat his injuries.
Is he hit anywhere? They're checking. Several shots fired. We got the guys. We're going to reach this if you want. We got an officer. We'll step down and see if he's been hit. Everybody expedite. Panda. McDonald's. Where are you hit, man? You having a picture? I don't know.
The Fairfax County Police Chief says the responding officers acted to save the life of the wounded officer.
But my assessment in this particular case was this is a once in a generation happening to a police department, even a big police department like Fairfax, big and busy. This doesn't happen but once a generation for a police officer to be the subject of someone attacking him trying to pull his own gun out of his holster. So, and it was very much in progress. He was assaulted, he was taken hostage, he was abducted. The actions of the two responding officers, I believe, were more than appropriate given what we know then and now. The investigation still has to move forward. We still have to ask questions that we need answers to, and some of those are forensic questions with forensic answers. So the investigation is not complete. The investigation is ongoing, but these officers, and I think, believe what you're seeing there. These officers ran toward gunfire, and their only intent was to save the life of that police officer who was screaming for help.
LeMagne was pronounced dead on the scene.
The perpetrator was struck several times. I don't know if we know right now. We may, as the investigation moves forward, which round or rounds proved to be the fatal rounds, and from which firearm they came from. Obviously, two uniformed Fairfax County police officers use their firearms, so we may be at a point in the future to know that. It happened so quickly. You see the second officer, and the word I used at the scene was bravery or hero. I think I used the word hero. I mean, you see that second officer who is running literally. You hear the phrase routinely about first responders, cops, firefighters running towards gunfire. He was running towards gunfire, literally, and you can see how he did that. So when he exposed himself, and he didn't know, and I imagine as our investigation will continue to reveal, to the extent that either officer or both officer even knew that our own police officer was still in the car. That's all part of our investigation. Did they think it was just the perpetrator? Did they think the officer was still in the car? That's something we're going to ask as the investigation moves forward. But certainly this was a violent crime in progress, and the officers who responded did so quickly. Thank God that they were so close and they were able to respond so quickly. And thankfully, you might pick up on this, our officer had his microphone attached to his upper vest, as opposed to when I came on, you had to pull your microphone out of your holster and put your thumb on it. So I think the fact that his microphone was so readily available on his outer vest carrier, he was able to transmit that someone was taking his gun. And I think he said, at least to the perpetrator 6 times, "Get off my gun, get off my gun, get off my gun." And I believe he made at least 3 radio transmissions to the effect of, "He has my gun, he has my gun, he has my gun." And by "he has my gun," clearly, and again, facts, not opinion, the perpetrator has both hands and one hand on that gun most of the time. And thankfully, the retention feature prevented that gun from coming out of the holster. And the officer, who's about a 3-year veteran, stayed on his feet. So I think that's consistent with his training. He made a radio transmission in real time under a great amount of stress, and other officers were able to get there and save his life.
From here, both a criminal and administrative investigation are underway into the officer-involved shooting. Reporting for Law and Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.